Hey, RetconRaider here. I've talked about Phoenix Point a lot over the past few months, and my two most recent Phoenix Point videos both revisited some of my earliest videos with updated information and cleaner audio. I've already revisited the Creatures of Phoenix Point, as well as the Pandora virus video, so it only makes sense for me to spend some time revisiting the factions as well. After all, it's been over 2 months since I made my original Factions of Phoenix Point video, and a lot of new information has become available since then. In fact, it's so much information that I'll be splitting this video up into 3 parts for the sake of convenience, starting with what seems to be the most popular of the factions thus far, the militant transhumanists of New Jericho. New Jericho is one of the 3 human-led factions that the player will have to interact with during the main campaign in Phoenix Point. Where the scientists of Sanhedrion have embraced the idea of coexisting with the virus, and the cult-like disciples of Anu wish to bend the virus to their will, the soldiers of New Jericho have a much more aggressive goal: the complete and utter destruction of both the Pandora virus as well as anyone and anything that it's infected. New Jericho takes a no-holds-barred, humanity-first mindset, evidenced by their original working title, the Human Confederation. They're intent on retaking the Earth from the alien invader no matter what the cost. Their specialty is the advancement of conventional military hardware, but they also have a surprising amount of proficiency in the fields of cybernetics and robotics. And by extension, they've essentially become transhumanists, not only intent on protecting humanity, but on artificially improving it as well. New Jericho is likely to be one of the easiest factions for the player to work with, since their goals roughly align with those of the Phoenix Project: to drive back the Pandora virus and save the Earth. But New Jericho is likely to make use of measures much more severe than those that the Phoenix Project would be likely to endorse, and their extreme methods are likely to make long-term cooperation with Sanhedrion or the Disciples of Anu all but impossible. Historically, we already have a pretty good idea of exactly where New Jericho came from. There are 3 key stories that expand upon the background and ideology of New Jericho: the New Jericho short story, recruiting, and Semper Fidelis, though we also get some additional perspective on them in both The Second Step and Towards Freedom. All of the information we have available seems to agree that the man who founded New Jericho is Major Tobias West, formerly of the United States Armed Forces. He served 2 tours in Syria before resigning his military commission sometime in the early 2020s, at which point he founded Vanadium Inc., an international organization specializing in private security and high-tech military solutions. They quickly became well known for their work in international waters, escorting transoceanic shipping containers and guarding oceanic oil rigs. Tobias is a man with a carefully cultivated international reputation, with ties in India, East Africa, and China, and a predominantly libertarian political ideology. He was active in American politics for years, but only until the mysterious Big Egg incident in 2027, which may mark the first time he became aware of the Pandora virus. After this, he notably ceased his political donations. Although we don't know much about exactly what happened during the incident, we do know that it involved the Halpine McAllister oil rig, Echo Gamma 18, and that 2 security guards provided by his company were present when the incident occurred. Afterwards, the focus of Vanadium Inc. appears to have shifted, moving from the provision of international security to a new focus on enhancing humanity's capacity through technology, which explains their eventual push towards transhumanism. This is the turning point that stories like Recruiting and Semper Fidelis help to illustrate. Recruiting, for example, shows us the first point where Vanadium Inc. began its slow transformation into what is now known as New Jericho. It gives us a glimpse into the types of people that they were actively recruiting: veteran soldiers with perspectives and worldviews shaped by their traumatic experiences on the battlefield. This story also gives us a brief glimpse of Vanadium's growing interest in the field of cybernetics, perhaps explaining why they were so interested in recruiting veteran soldiers with physical handicaps. Semper Fidelis, a story which takes place a short time after recruiting, further drives home the idea that Vanadium had refocused its attention on the looming threat of the Pandora virus. In Semper Fidelis, Vanadium shows a keen interest in a small company called EnyoSec, which had apparently found a Pandora virus-spawned mutant frozen in Antarctica. Vanadium dispatched a squadron of soldiers to Antarctica, even going so far as to team up with a recently disenfranchised Phoenix Project operative, under the pretense of having a vested corporate interest in their latest business acquisition. But after they arrived at the EnyoSec facility and discovered the extent of the outbreak, their true intentions became clear. They had brought a sufficient amount of napalm and explosives to purge the entire facility. The simple fact that they brought such a tremendous amount of ordnance with them seems to indicate that their intentions may have always been to destroy the facility, which would be in keeping with the extremist mindset that New Jericho would later be known for. The other brief glimpses we're given of New Jericho's development in later stories continues to reinforce these themes. The organization was actively recruiting personnel and developing technology in preparation for the final war against the Pandora virus. The second step includes a brief mention of how Vanadium Inc. made an effort to purchase research on the Pandora virus from the fledgling Firebird Initiative, the research collective that later became the foundation for Synedrion. Likewise, Towards Freedom gives us another glimpse of their intentions, with a brief segment that tells us of how they attempted to recruit a Phoenix Project operative, and how they were dedicated to advancing their research into the use of exoskeleton technology. This mindset of active advancement and recruitment is one that is maintained even in the 2050s, at the point where the game first starts. Officially known as New Jericho by this point, the organization has multiple havens scattered across the globe, and they're known for broadcasting pro-human propaganda, with an open invitation for new recruits to join their efforts against the Pandora virus. From a gameplay standpoint, the benefits of working alongside New Jericho are fairly obvious. They have both ample and well-trained personnel, as well as aggressive research programs focused on developing more effective battlefield technology. If the player chooses to ally with New Jericho, then they will likely gain access to both additional well-trained manpower, as well as research that will focus on more powerful weaponry. For example, of the many weapons that we've seen teased so far, we know that all three of these flamethrower prototypes are based on New Jericho designs. We don't know if that means that all flamethrowers in the game will be locked behind exclusive New Jericho research projects, but it does give us a good idea of what sorts of weapons the faction favors. Ones that inflict indiscriminate damage over a wide area of effect. It's the sort of weaponry that's ideal for offensive missions, but ones that you generally wouldn't want to use on defensive missions, for fear of causing collateral damage. The soldiers of New Jericho also display a predilection towards using Gauss weaponry. Gauss weapons have been teased in some of the concept art as well, and while there's no word on whether Gauss technology will be exclusive to New Jericho, we do know that Gauss weapons have been shown in at least 2 pieces of New Jericho concept art. Speaking of which, this vehicle is also indicative of the New Jericho design philosophy. It appears to be largely based on a conventional armored car, and according to Snapshot Games, it's designed to transport up to 8 soldiers at a time, with one manning the Gauss gun mounted on the turret. But it also appears to feature front-mounted auto guns, which is in keeping with the faction's offense-first mindset. Beyond conventional weaponry and vehicles, we know that New Jericho will be making use of powered armor in the battlefield, which isn't much of a surprise given that they expressed interest in exoskeletal technology in the past. While other factions will also have access to this general technology, New Jericho specifically focuses on using their version of it to bring bigger, heavier weapons into battle. Similarly, it has been confirmed that New Jericho will make use of battlefield drones, again with a focus on bringing heavier firepower onto the battlefield. While other factions will feature drones with a mixture of defense, recon, and mobility specializations, New Jericho will specialize in fielding static ground-mobile weapon platforms. Perhaps the most fascinating aspect of New Jericho's research efforts is their use of cybernetics, something they make such heavy use of that it borders on transhumanism. According to Julian Gollop, their fear of genetic contamination from the Pandora virus is so great that New Jericho is known to offer preemptive amputation of mutated or contaminated limbs amongst their citizens, replacing amputated limbs with advanced cybernetic prosthetics, some of which can be further enhanced for greater utility on the battlefield. It's hard to imagine exactly how far New Jericho might be willing to go with their human enhancements. It's entirely possible that, in the end, the staunch protectors of New Jericho will be more machine than man. But as far as Tobias West is concerned, that's probably just fine, as long as they don't have even a hint of alien DNA in them. In many ways, I think that New Jericho is the faction that most players will find it easiest to identify with. Our media is rife with examples of humanity fighting back against hostile alien invaders. And, in many ways, that's always been the core principle of the XCOM franchise in the first place. Personally, I'm predicting that New Jericho will end up being the most popular of the three NPC factions. But that's not to say that the other factions don't have their own appeal as well. Both Synedrion and the Disciples of Anu also want to save humanity from extinction. They just advocate for less extreme methods, relatively speaking. We'll delve a bit deeper into that next week with part 2 of my Factions Revisited series, as we take a closer look at everything we know so far about Synedrion. But until then, this is RetconRaider, signing off. Thanks for listening. Oh, and remember, although I do love talking about Phoenix Point, you can find out all the latest news by visiting the official website, or the crowdfunding campaign on Fig. Links are in the description.